Jim's our external accountant, so he takes care of, making sure the accounts are filed at the end of the year, and acts as our third-party person, if you like, outside of the office to make sure we're not doing anything dodgy that we shouldn't be doing. I've got a lot of time for Jim, and we have a close bond with FAB Accountants. This is the first that Jim has done specifically for IIMS members. I hope you're going to find this helpful. I know, Jim, you've given several presentations now to your clients and a whole range of people in the last couple of weeks. And I know from having spoken to you earlier today, there are still some things that are really not crystal clear and are still open to interpretation.
Yes, correct.
I've asked Jim to start really in focusing on a couple of areas. One is for people who are sole traders. I think most of you online today will be sole traders, but if you have working for a limited company as well, Jim, I think you'll touch on a bit about furloughing and what that involves.
Yes.
And the final point before I hand over, Jim, I'm indebted to you for doing this. Thank you very much indeed. And I'd like also to, at the end, perhaps just talk about payment holidays, something that everybody should look at. So perhaps we'll look at some ideas as to where you might be able to get a payment holiday. So without further ado, Jim, it's over to you.
Great. Can we just check? I don't know if you can just raise your hand so Mike can see it. Is anyone in an office or has premises and pays small business rates or gets relief from small business rates? Because that's quite a big part of the presentation, which we'll skip over if it's not applicable.
I can't see many hands going up. One or two. Okay,
well, we'll touch on that and we'll take some questions, but I won't dwell on that because it won't apply to lots of people. And so basically we have been taking our advice from the source that we see the most reliable. So the gov.uk website has obviously, as you'd imagine, a whole COVID-19 section. And every press release and conference that the government are doing is uploaded onto this website. So we're taking this as where we get our information from. We do, we have obviously looked at other reliable websites and just to get opinion, but we see it that anything that's not on this website is just an opinion and not in the rules and regulations. So this is where we're sort of getting our advice from. So there are several areas of support for small businesses, limited companies and sole traders. So we'll touch on each of these during the presentation, and as I say, at the end of each section we'll just give you an opportunity to ask some questions and specific areas that may relate to your businesses. So we've split them into sort of two areas. There's what we call grants, so this is support for the business which will not need to be paid back to the government at any point, and then there are what we call loans, which is support for your immediate cash flow, but will still be something that at some point in the future you will be asked to pay back. So we'll go through each of these and, as I say, ask some questions at the end. So if you were one of those that stuck your hand up, if you have got an office or a yard that you work from, potentially you will be eligible for a small business grant through the rates system through your local authority. So if you are in a small office and your rateable value is below £15,000, which you will be able to see from your rates bill, and we'll give you a couple of other areas where you can find that out shortly, then you will be eligible for a grant of £10,000. As far as we're aware, there's no sort of strings attached to that. That is just to support your business and up to you how and where you spend it. So this is probably the biggest actual support that's out there, but unfortunately it doesn't apply to lots of people. So ourselves, for example, we're in serviced offices and our landlord pays the rates, so we're not eligible for the grant. Anyone working from home won't be. We'll run through it quite quickly. This won't apply to anyone, I believe, unless we've got any marina owners, Mike, but if there's a bigger grant for businesses like restaurants and cafes that have been sort of forcibly closed. So as I say, we'll skip over this. If it does apply to anyone, we can take any questions later. So the way to check if you do think you've got an office and you pay rates, the way to check if you're eligible, look at your last rates bill. It should show if you're claiming small business rates relief. And even if you're not paying rates, you will get a bill showing that and saying that you've got nothing to pay. So that would be your first port of call. If you're then not sure, you can look at the government website and the valuation office agency. Pop in your postcode of your premises, and that will tell you the rateable value of it. And thirdly, which is probably the best way to get direct information, because the local authorities are administering the scheme, is to call your local authority, and the business rates department should be able to confirm to you, number one, whether you're eligible, and number two, the process for receiving this money. It is, I've had a couple of clients that have received it today, so this scheme is now sort of moving, and the cash is coming through. So I guess this will apply to lots of you. Whatever work from home, unfortunately, unless you're paying some business rates, then there's no support for you at the moment in terms of this grant. The same with serviced offices, although there is some hope for us in the section in red here is an update that we did yesterday. So it has been noted on a couple of the council websites that they're saying, if you can see the question there, so my business is not eligible for small business rates relief, and they've said examples include, people working from home and in serviced offices. And then on their website, they're saying, we are awaiting further guidance from government around what support is available for businesses in your circumstances. So that sort of indicates to me that there may be something more coming. I think the Chancellor is due to take the press conference on Friday, and there will be some announcements, I think, certainly around the loan scheme, which we'll touch on later, but this may be something else that they're looking at as well, because obviously lots of small businesses, do run from home or from serviced offices, and they're not getting any support at the moment. So that, just a very quick overview of that. If there are any questions, if it does apply to anyone, Mike, then we can take them now, but as I said, I don't think that would be applicable to most of the audience today.
Sure, if anybody wants to ask a question at this point. Keep going, please, Jim.
Okay, yeah.
Jim, hang on, it's just me. I got a quick one. Hi, I have a shop on the high street.
Yep.
And I do work from home, but we do some stuff there as well.
Yep.
Would that be applicable?
So if you're paying rates on that shop, so when you say a shop, what activity are you undertaking from the shop?
Well, it's basically, between me and my partner. She has a craft shop, and I use the back office when I'm in town.
Yep. So if she's selling from that premises, then it would depend on the rateable value, which I guess you wouldn't know. But if your rateable value is 15,000 or below, then you should be getting small business rates relief. So you're probably not paying rates, but you will be eligible for this grant. So I would suggest, phone the local authority and number one, see that they've got you on the register, and then secondly, ask them, if you're qualifying for the grant. If your shop's big enough and your rateable value is between 15,000 and 51,000, then you're actually eligible for a £25,000 grant, because you would come under the retail sector with that shop. So yeah, that is definitely something you need to look at, and phone your local authority, because that money is starting to come out already.
Right, thanks.
Okay. Anything else on that? No. Okay. So
can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
What about a business that's starting up during this period?
In terms of?
Well, I'm planning to start a different business.
Yeah.
Which would be on land using paying rates.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure whether these schemes apply only to existing businesses or one.
Yes, I believe so. So yeah, if you haven't already got a lease on those premises, then it wouldn't apply to anyone sort of moving in from a couple of weeks ago, I believe.
Okay, you're confident about that?
Not as with all of these, there are still, quite a large lack of detail around most of these schemes. I wouldn't know on the rates one in particular, but certainly with the other schemes, they're looking at what was the status quo at the end of February in terms of how they're then looking to support people. So potentially, so there is I've skipped over it there. There is a sort of rates holiday for retail and leisure businesses for the next tax year starting 6th of April. So potentially that would apply, and you wouldn't pay any rates if you moved in. But I think, in terms of the grants, I'm pretty sure you'd have to have an agreement in place by now to receive any of those.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, if we can just have a little show of hands for Mike. How many people employ anyone else?
I'm just having a scoot down, Jim. Yeah, 1 or 2 hands.
1 or 2. Okay, so we'll go over quite quickly, but there's 2 elements to this really. Is number 1, if you employ people, but number 2, your status if you're running your own limited company as a director. So the coronavirus job retention scheme was announced a couple of weeks ago. It's I think everyone understands now. I think when it was announced, people assumed that the way it was presented, that they were getting, coverage for 80% of everyone's salary that they were paying. That's clearly not the case. So this scheme is to protect jobs really, and again, it's mainly it was aimed at the sort of retail and leisure sectors when they had to close their doors, and obviously lots of waitresses and shop workers were sort of laid off at that point. So this provides support for businesses that would have to have laid people off, and what it says is that you can furlough them, which is a word that nobody had ever heard of 2 weeks ago, but now is the buzzword. So you can furlough your workers instead of making them redundant, basically, and the government will pay 80% of their wages up to a maximum of £2,500 a month. As the employer, you can then decide to pay the additional 20% to keep them on their normal pay, but obviously that would depend on your circumstances and cash flow. So if you have got employees that you've no longer got any work to give to, you can use this scheme. The government will set up an online portal, which they're telling us will be by the end of April. I have my doubts based on past experiences, but once that scheme's established, then you will put in a claim as an employer to refund the money that you've in effect paid out to those furloughed employees. So there's some rules and regulations around people that you do furlough. So as I just said on the rates one, so it's available for any employee that was on your payroll on the 28th of February. Anyone hired after the 28th of February, it wouldn't be applicable to. Anyone who's on obviously lots of self-isolating and sick leave at the moment, anyone who's sort of doing that in line with the guidance can still be furloughed. If your employee had another job, then effectively they could be furloughed for both of them. So that might apply to part-time workers. And as the employer, if you are going to furlough someone, you need to get it in writing that they've agreed to that. It is a material change to their contract of employment, and to cover yourself, you need to get their agreement that they can be furloughed. So then in terms of the payment to them, so the furlough payments would be sort of as a normal payment, subject to tax and national insurance. As I mentioned, you could top up the pay to 100% if you wanted to, but there's no obligation to do that. So if your worker is on a salary, then obviously it's easy to work out what that payment would be. If it's someone who works irregular hours or part-time or just works for you sometimes during the year, then there's basically we work out an average earnings for 1920, and that's then used as the basis for their furlough pay. and that doesn't include any sort of bonuses, commissions, etc. If those employees, if you've got any employees on parental pay, so maternity leave, adoption leave, etc., then the normal rules of those schemes will sort of override any furlough payment, but you can still furlough those employees, so that when they come off of that parental leave, they would just switch over to furloughed pay. And this may be applicable. I spoke to Mike earlier that training is something that we've all got a bit of time to do now. So if you have got an employee, you can ask them to sort of undertake some training courses whilst they're furloughed, and they're allowed to do that under the terms of the furlough, so they still get the furlough pay. They can be doing training courses, but as the employer, you have an obligation to make sure that whilst they're doing that training, they're earning at least minimum wage. So it's a little technicality which shouldn't apply to too many people. But the main sort of regulation around this, so this is where there's a bit of confusion with employees. So if you furlough someone, they cannot work for you at all. So it's no good saying you're going to furlough someone, send them home and they're doing your social media or some admin or whatever. They can't provide any services or generate any revenue for your business whilst they're furloughed. It is, it's as if you've made them redundant, but you're just holding their job. So if they are doing work for you, there will be some anti-avoidance regulations around that. Whilst they're furloughed, they can volunteer for NHS or anyone else. As I say, they can undertake training, and they can even get a job elsewhere, but they can't work for you. So that's the sort of main thing. A furloughed employee can be furloughed for a minimum of 3 weeks. So once you've done that, they can't come back for 3 weeks. But once they've done their 3 weeks, they can come back for a week and do some work and then be furloughed again. So, if you've got an employee that actually you think, well, I was going to sort of cut their hours in half, you can't do that, but you could say to them, okay, we're going to furlough you for 3 weeks. You can then come and work for 3 weeks and then we'll furlough you again. So there's a little bit of flexibility there to sort of keep your staff working if you've got them. And then, as I've already touched on, the payment service is not sort of up and running yet. We realise that needs to happen quickly. Cash is sort of running dry for lots of people already, and they're not going to have the money to pay these employees unless the government get this scheme up and running quite quickly. Okay, so probably the more applicable. So again, can we just check if we got a mix of people that are self-employed and people that are directors of their own company?
Yes, you have.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So this is quite a big topic, obviously. So I'm not sure. Obviously, your individual circumstances. Some of you, Mike has explained, will still be working. Others probably can't at the moment. So it is technically possible if you're a director of your own limited company and you're the only sort of employee, or even if you've got other employees, so you can technically furlough yourself if you're a director. Now we'll go through the sort of points that you've got to be careful of, because there's been quite a bit of discussion around this. So directors can be furloughed. Obviously, you've probably heard there's no support for directors under the self-employed scheme at the moment, but if you furlough yourself, you can get support for your salary. Now that won't include, I suspect most of you will be taking a small salary and dividends to then take your income. So the furlough will only cover the salary part of your income, which typically will probably be about £700 a month if we're trying to do it tax efficiently. The rules are, if you furlough yourself, the rules about not working are the same as they are for employees. So you wouldn't be able to promote your business or try and generate income or advertise. The only duties you could carry out was sort of your statutory director's duties, such as filing accounts and confirmation statements, etc. So that's a bit of a grey area. What we have advised our clients is if you're expecting any income at all during the period you're furloughed, that would probably exclude you from being furloughed. So it really is only if you're going to shut down for 2 months and you're not going to have any income, then potentially you can use this.
Jim, can I just jump
yes.
in with a question from Hugh?
Sure.
Is a business partner and the business is not limited self-employed?
If so if you're in a partnership, you would fall under the self-employed scheme, which we'll go through in a minute.
Thank you.
Okay. So again, touching on the sort of 3-week thing again. So again, potentially as a director, you could furlough yourself for 3 weeks, then do a week where you do all your business for the month, and then re-furlough yourself. There's a bit of a lack of detail certainly around this area. We think there might be some clarity coming over the next few days, but I think it's just be a little bit careful if you are going to furlough yourself. It will be sort of subject to scrutiny, I think, and if your business is still trading to some extent, it's going to be difficult.
Another question, Jim, I'll fire them in if I may.
Yeah, sure.
From Leander Consultancy. If furloughed as a director, can I continue to file my direct debits for websites and so on?
Sorry, I didn't quite understand it. File direct debits for websites.
Yeah, Leander Consultancy, I don't know who you are actually, I'm sorry. Can you give a bit more detail whilst that's coming through? Sanjay asks, can we claim furlough status later if there is no work for, say, 2 months?
Yes, so at the moment, the furlough scheme is open. So they've sort of backdated it for anyone that was already laid off. So that obviously wouldn't apply to any directors, but it's running from 1st of March to the 31st of May at the moment. They've said that will be extended if necessary. So, assuming we're still in some sort of situation at the end of May, I think that will be extended. So yes, if you had sort of work to finish during April, but then that dries up, you could furlough yourself from May.
Questions are coming, so I'll keep going if I may.
Yep.
To clarify, if we have been furloughed for 3 days rather than 3 weeks, we would then not be eligible for the 3 days.
Correct. Yeah, it has to be a minimum of 3 weeks.
Minimum of 3 weeks. Thanks
Yeah.
for clarifying. And I've now got, sorry, Leander Consultancy. I pay for my advertising and website monthly via direct debits, or would I need to stop these during the furlough period?
So if it's just sort of passive advertising that, if you've paid for some space on a website, that would be fine. That contract sort of is running anyway. So and the direct debit's going out, so that would be fine. It would be more, if you're doing stuff on LinkedIn or presenting webinars or something, like we're doing today. So that anything that would be seen to be you actively working on promoting your business would exclude it. But yeah, if it's a passive advertisement, then that would be fine. And
Alistair says, will Jim be touching on taxable nature of any grants?
Yes, I have. I sort of skipped over that in a minute. So the rates grant is taxable to corporation tax. So when you receive that, the next set of accounts you will have to show that as income, and that will be taxable. I think we're lots of businesses will struggle to make a profit, I think, in the current situation. So but yeah, that would be taxable. The furloughing, as we say, the payment to the employees is taxable on them as normal. So if they receive £2,500, that will be gross, and the normal tax would be deducted. But similarly, the money then coming into you. So as a limited company, you would get tax relief on the payment you're making to your employee, but you would be taxed on the income coming back in for the reimbursement. So it's a sort of negative. You get tax relief and a tax burden at the same time, which cancels each other out. So just the last couple of points on this. So as I say, any payments will be based on what you've declared up to the 28th of February. So there's no way you can sort of suddenly increase your salary and get more furlough money. You know, they're going to be quite strict around that. And you know, just to say, we don't know how this is all going to be sort of measured and monitored and policed. It's certainly open to unscrupulous people trying to take advantage. So we imagine there would be a lot of scrutiny around the claims, if not immediately, certainly, you know, as we get through this and they get round to checking on people. And then finally, if you are going to furlough someone, and even with yourself, we recommend an agreement that just shows that your employees have agreed to be furloughed. And we've got a template that we're using, which I can pass on to you, Mike, if anyone wants to.
Thank you. Very helpful. Okay,
and then just finally, just really to sort of cover ourselves, you know, as I said, there's a lot of detail still that needs confirming, and you know, this is not you still have to sort of comply with all of the normal HR rules and regulations. So, you know, the government have announced this scheme, but it is, you know, it's still you in a contract with your employees. So, you know, you have to be aware that you've got to follow the normal procedures, and, you know, potentially you furlough someone for 3 months, you may then still have to make them redundant at the end of that furlough period, and you would have to go through the normal procedures to do that. Okay, so unless there's any other questions on furloughing, we'll take them now.
Stony silence, Jim.
Okay, so I'm just going to skip over this. I think the sick pay was the first sort of relief that they announced. I think that's been trumped by the furloughing now. So just very quickly, if you had someone, you know, sick with something related to coronavirus, or whether if they were isolating for 1 or 2 weeks, you can claim the sick pay that you're paying out to them back from the government. So that's you know, that's just a little relief that they announced. But I think furloughing has sort of trumped that. So we go on now to the loan schemes.
Jim,
yes,
can I just jump in once before we leave furlough? Question from David Jack. Does the employee's salary on the 28th of February set the figure for the furlough amount? So
if they are salaried, so they receive, you know, the same amount each month, then yes. So, you know, if they had an amount paid in January, then had a nice pay rise in February, then it would be that February amount that we can use for furlough. If they work, as I said, sort of different hours, so if their gross pay is different each month, then it would work on the average over the last year.
Thank you.
Okay, so we now move on to the loan scheme. So really, this is something that's been put in place to support your cash flow. It's, you know, need to make clear it's not a grant in any way, shape, or form. It will be money that you borrow, and whether you do that as an individual or a business, you will, you know, have to pay it back at some point. The banks are sort of getting some pressure now to sort of release this money a bit quicker. I think they're asking you to jump through the normal hoops, and anyone who's applied for finance knows that's not always easy. So I think the government are putting some pressure on the banks to relax a little bit on the scheme rules, although the banks are saying they're only following what the government have told them to do. So but basically, the interruption loan scheme is something that you can apply for, and the sort of the strange part of it, I guess, so you would have to approach your bank for a normal loan first, and if they would say yes, we'd normally do that, but you haven't got any security or we're not comfortable, they could then put you into the loan scheme. Now, some banks we've heard are trying to get you onto their own products, which will attract an interest charge, whereas if you're going onto the loan scheme, the government are paying that interest for the first 12 months. So, you know, there's a bit of confusion around it at the moment, but we'll sort of go through it, and then I can answer any questions. So I won't go through all of these, but this is an email that we had directly from HSBC. So you can see there, it's not a simple question, are you going to lend us some money? There's lots of hoops that you have to go through. The main one being that number one, actually I think that's on, sorry, no. Yeah, so I'll just go through the summary page on this actually. So the main one being you need a robust business plan. So you're going to have to do a cash flow which shows, number one, how you've been affected by coronavirus, and I think that's fairly easy for all of us. So your income will have been affected, but the main thing is then show how, if you are applying for funding, how's that funding going to help you survive and sort of come out the other end of this. Now, that at the moment is extremely difficult to forecast, because none of us know how long we're going to be in lockdown for. We don't know what the economy is going to look like, and how long it's going to take to recover afterwards. But that's the criteria that the banks are looking to lend on at the moment. I think the more movement sort of last night was around, if you had a good business before this, then they're going to support you. If you were a bit shaky anyway, then it might be more difficult to prove these things. As I say, I think the government are putting some pressure on the banks to relax the criteria a bit.
Jim, is there any indication yet on the sort of interest rates they're wanting to charge? Are they kind of what I would call normal interest rates? Or?
Again, so really sort of wide-ranging stories on this. It should be sort of normal, but another reason the banks might, they will earn more money by funding you on their own products, and we've heard stories of the banks trying to get loans into people at silly interest rates, bearing in mind the base rate sort of 0.1% at the moment, and again, this is where they're getting a bit of pressure, I think. So it just varies. There's lots of funders on the Business Bank website. I don't think I've got a link on here, but if you look at Business Bank UK, that has a link to all the lenders that are sort of working under the scheme. They vary from high street banks to sort of asset finance companies to factoring companies who would finance you based on your invoices, etc. So there's lots of ways to access the scheme, but from our point of view, if you get the lending, you want to try and do it under the actual scheme rather than via your bank, because the government are then paying your first year of interest, and those rates should be, I can't remember the wording they use, but they've again just told the banks that it's not an opportunity to charge silly interest rates under this scheme.
Jim, I've got a question from Andrew.
Yeah.
Will they support cash flow, i.e. keeping us afloat? I had the impression from HSBC when I went online was that I needed a good business case, which in my mind means an investment rather than just keeping afloat.
Well, I think what they mean by good business case, so what they don't want to do is sort of throw money at businesses for them only to not make it through anyway after 3 months. So I'll be honest, we've applied for some funding through our bank. We were asked to provide a 6-month cash flow forecast, which is probably a bit more short term than normally we'd expect. But I think that is what the banks are sort of working on, really. It's going to be a 6-month cycle to get us through this. So if you can demonstrate that any funding you're applied for will be used to pay your rent while you're closed, or support you keeping your team in place, or enable you to market to new markets or customers that once things pick up, you can do, or to diversify your business, take it online somehow, so as long as there's a case that actually this money is going to be used to adapt my business and take it forward, rather than just it's going to keep me having some income for 3 months, but then the business is just relying on things to turn around. So you do need to give them some idea of what that money will be used for, and how it's going to help you get through the situation.
So 2 more points, if I may. Andrew continues on. Also, are some banks saying that if you are eligible under the normal terms, then you are not eligible for CBILS?
That is, yeah, that's the sort of implications that we're getting at the moment. This scheme is it's sort of loosely based on something they used to have in place called the Enterprise Finance Guarantee, which was basically a scheme to back mainly startup businesses, but to back businesses who had a really good business case, and the banks liked the sort of proposals, but didn't have any security to sort of secure that finance. And then in which case the government would back it through the EFG scheme. So this is quite similar. So if you have got, security that you can offer, the banks were saying, well, we're still going to put you on a normal loan. We would lend to you anyway. We don't need the CBILS scheme. I think that's what's going to be announced Friday, is that actually anyone who applies can probably do it under this scheme, because otherwise there are going to be people who've built up a good asset base and some savings are going to be penalised against those that haven't. So that's the feeling, I think, what will be announced on Friday, that you should be able to go into the scheme even if your bank would lend to you normally. So
Andrew has chipped in further. It says, but the answers to those 2 questions seem to contradict one another, or is it all about security?
Well, as I say, it is a hot topic, this one. So there was lots of pressure yesterday. The Secretary of State, I think it was yesterday, did the press conference, sort of touched on it and announced that the Chancellor is looking at this, and it's been put out today in the press that this is the area he's looking at. So I believe if you've got security, even if you've got security, they will put you into this scheme now. That's my understanding of what will change Friday, but it's a little bit up in the air at the moment.
And a question from Bonnie, who asked an interesting question. Should I apply for a loan and be referred to the scheme? Could I borrow and then as an individual lend to the company at higher interest and pocket the difference through tax relief on the interest?
So the scheme, so if you've got a limited company, I think you would probably need to apply through the limited company. If you're doing it as a sort of personal loan, yeah, I mean, in theory, you could take personal lending, but I think you wouldn't have a business plan. If you're trying to do it as an individual, you wouldn't come under this scheme, because it needs to be a business plan. So if you're doing it as a sole trader to finance your business, that would be fine. But if you're doing it as a limited company, I don't think you could take out personal finance and then inject it into the business. You could obviously take a normal personal loan and do that, but not under this scheme.
A question from Richard Snow. As students of IIMS working towards the diploma, what suggestions do you have for someone wanting to start a sole trader business in the next 4 months?
In terms of getting support to do that, you won't qualify. So the rule, we'll come on to the sole trader scheme in a minute, which will cover the rules around the loans. But just in general advice, obviously it's not an ideal time to be starting out in business, but people will still be doing it. And I think the main thing at the moment is just not trying to limit any personal risk that you're taking by doing that. So if you're investing a lot of money into starting your business up, make sure that you have got some clients there to go after and to generate some income. It is going to be a difficult time, no doubt.
That's all the questions I have for now, Jim. So
okay, so we'll move on to and it's quite a quick one. So I don't know how many of you are sort of VAT registered, but a lot of you will obviously be paying self-assessment. So we'll go quickly through these as they're quite simple. So if you're VAT registered, any VAT return payments that you have due between the 20th of March and the 30th of June. So for example, if your VAT quarter ended in February, your payment would have been due 7th of April. So any payments that are due between those two dates are going to be automatically deferred, which basically means you don't have to ring up the revenue and tell them. Automatically deferred, and that's the key word, until April 2021. So any money that's due to HMRC on your VAT return is still going to be due to them, but they're going to defer that payment till April 2021.
Can we override that, Jim, if we want to, and pay it?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to pay it, of course, then they're not going to stop that. Yeah, it's we'll come on to general advice at the end. I think obviously if you're in a strong financial position, you may want to do that. I think a lot of people, the good advice will be just to look after your immediate cash flow really at the moment until we know a bit more how this is going to sort of work through. But yeah, you can pay it. What I would say, so they said it's an automatic deferment, but you will need to cancel your direct debit with your bank. Otherwise, HMRC will take that VAT money. If you usually pay by direct debit, they will take it. So cancel your direct debit with your bank, and then there'll be no sort of penalties or interest on this deferred money. The income tax. So if a lot of you are self-employed, there will be assuming you've made your sort of first payment on account in January, there'll be another payment due 31st of July. Again, they have said that is going to be deferred until January 2021. So when you do your next tax returns next year for the year just ending 5th of April, you will have to pay any second payment on account that you've missed in July. So again, it's a deferment, not a grant or anything, but it does help short-term cash flow. Most people will pay that by bank transfer or check, so you just don't need to make that payment, and again there'll be no interest or penalties on those. If just quickly, if you've got other HMRC debt, corporation tax if you're a limited company, or PAYE if you're an employer or paying yourself a salary perhaps, then there's no sort of automatic deferments on those, but they are being very open to time to pay arrangements. So if your cash flow is dried up and you can't make those payments, give them a call and they will spread that over at least 12 months. We've had people doing it over more than that, but certainly if you ask for 12 months, that will not be a problem. Any questions on that section quickly? It's quite straightforward, I think.
Nothing at my end, Jim.
Okay. So this is the one that probably applies to a lot of you. So people that are self-employed. So there was a lot of pressure on government last week. They hadn't announced anything to support self-employed people, and this was announced on Friday. We've got a fair bit of detail around it. There will still be more to come over the coming weeks, but this is what we know about the scheme at the moment. So the scheme is sort of set up to broadly align with the circumstances of furloughed workers. So if you as a self-employed person, if your income has sort of dried up and you can't work at the moment, then you will be eligible for a taxable grant worth 80% of your trading profits, up to a maximum of £2,500 per month, and they will pay that for the next 3 months, so April, May, June, and that may be extended if needed. So you need to be self-employed, so this doesn't apply anyone who's a company director, even if it's just you in that company. This doesn't apply to you, so you need to be self-employed and declare it on your self-assessment tax return each year. But you can be self-employed in a partnership. So if there's two of you in a partnership, you're both self-employed. So the rules around this: you need to still be trading when you apply. So if you were self-employed and have just set up a limited company, unfortunately that will exclude you from this. So you need to still be trading as a sole trader. You need to intend to continue to trade in the next year, and how they'll measure that I don't know, but so make sure you are intending to continue. You need to have submitted your tax return for the tax year 2018-19, so that those were the ones due in 31st of January. if for whatever reason you haven't done that, they have sort of given you a deadline of 23rd of April, I believe, to get that return in. So you have still got an opportunity to do that. This is where there's a little bit. I think there's going to be a burden of proof on you to prove this, but you need to have lost trading profits due to COVID-19. So again, how they're going to measure that, we're not sure, but I think there will be probably an application form or something where you will need to show that you have lost. Now, obviously, if your income's disappeared, then that should be reasonably straightforward to do. But again, there may be people looking to take advantage who are still working and generating income. So, that's something I think you're going to have to submit some proof on. And then there are some then rules about your income. So your trading profits need to be less than £50,000 for you to get any support under this scheme. And that is measured by either your tax return for last year or an average of your last 3 tax returns. So if you earned 52,000 last year but 40,000 in the previous 2 years, then you'll be fine. You'll be below the average. Or other way around, if you earned 60,000 for the previous 2 years but only 40,000 last year, you would still qualify. So, but that is an all or nothing. If your average or if both of your average and last year's earnings are over 50,000, you won't get any support under the scheme at the moment. And your self-employed profits need to be at least half of your total income. So we'll explain a little bit more about that on the next page.
Just before you head to the next page, can I just jump in? I've got a couple of questions here.
Mm-hmm.
So Anthony says, from what I understand, HMRC will be contacting each individual, reference the amount that they will pay them.
Yeah, correct. So so this is under the applying section here. So HMRC, the reason they've sort of done the scheme this way, so they've obviously got the tax returns that they need to get the information from. So they are going to write to you or contact you to say that they believe you're eligible, and then invite you to apply online. So the way we think it will work is, they'll look at your last 3 tax returns, calculate the average that they believe, and then write to you and probably indicate those figures. But it would then be up to you to actually apply for that support. So that process again is not there at the moment. It's something they're setting up and trying to put in place as quickly as they can. They've already said that the earliest anyone will see any money is going to be early June. So it's not worth contacting them. They haven't got the information they need, and you'll just be wasting yours and their time. So so you will apply. They will then scrutinise that claim, I guess, and then ask for payment details so they can pay you back. Again, I'm not trying to be negative, but experience of HMRC systems is doesn't fill me with confidence that this is going to be a smooth process, but that's what they're putting together at the moment.
Ben Evans has asked, would the fact that marinas and yards have closed be proof of not being able to work?
I would think so, yes. I mean, as I say, we don't know what the burden of proof's going to be. And we think, and this is only our thoughts, but they'll then probably a sort of retrospective check as well when you submit your tax returns in 2 years' time. That will or January 2022. Then if your profits are higher than they were in 2019 anyway, then there'll probably be some sort of retrospective clawback maybe. But I think we just don't know what they're going to ask for. It's going to have to be shown in some way. But certainly, I think if you work for specific people and you can show that they've been closed, then that will be enough proof, I would imagine. I've
got a couple more here, Jim. Andrew W asks, will it be averaged if you made a loss, you carried over?
So yeah, this is one thing that's not been clarified. So sorry, I'm just trying to find my average screen. Oh, where am I? Yeah, this one. So the average is going to be worked out on the last 3 years. Yeah, we don't know is the honest answer. If you had a loss in one of those years, we don't know whether that's going to be taken into account to reduce your average, or whether they would just look at the years that you were actually profitable. I would imagine losses would be excluded from the calculation. It would seem a bit unfair to penalise someone who's maybe had a bit of a hard time with it anyway. So, and the other thing to note is if you haven't been trading for 3 years, then they would just take into account the years that you have. So, if they've only got 1 or 2 years worth of tax returns, they will look at the average on those rather than the whole 3 years. But that needs to be clarified. We don't have that information at the moment.
Okay, Andrew Edmund makes 3 points. If we invoice clients for work done in March and receive the money, will they then say we still have cash flow, hence not stop working? That's the first point.
So again, we don't know what the burden of. I mean, obviously, a lot of you will still have bits and pieces of income at the moment. We don't think so. So this scheme's slightly different from the furlough that it sort of runs from April, May, June rather than March, April, May for the furlough. So they realise obviously a lot of us were still trading sort of properly up to the middle of March. I don't think they're going to look at individual months in terms of this support. It will be an overall picture. So yeah, certainly if you've done work in March and that money's not paid till April, that won't affect any amounts you can claim under the claim, I don't believe.
And the second point, is there any discussion about how we cover fixed costs? My fixed costs will significantly eat into what they might pay.
Yeah, so we'll cover that when we talk about other actions you can take. They're not going to. All they're going to look at is your profit over those years. That's what they're going to support you towards. That information is is already over a year old. So lots of people are going to have very different circumstances to what was shown in those tax returns for those years. But yeah, that there's not going to be any sort of assessment of your current situation. It's just going to be based on that historic data.
And Andrew asks, is the scheme currently only for 3 months?
At the moment, yes, but they did say so this may be extended if needed. So it's 3 months as we stand, but obviously if we're all still on lockdown, then it will be extended, I believe.
And Hugh is just seeking a bit of clarification. Is a trading profit the amount you pay yourself before tax?
So if you are a sole trader, it will be the amount that's shown as taxable income on your tax return each year. So again, there's a little bit of confusion. So you could generate, let's say you generated profits of 20,000 in a year. You may have bought a van for the business, which you would get sort of deducted from your taxable profit. Now, we think they would go on the higher figure, but that again is something that needs to be clarified when they release details. So look at your tax return. What that you should have a sort of summary of your tax calculation on there, and that will show your taxable income on that document.
And Richard's asked a question actually for me, not for you, Jim.
Okay.
So he's studying at the moment, and he's concerned that he's not going to be able to, with the ongoing disruption, lack of ability for field research. Will IIMS students receive an extension on the time to complete the units and modules? Yes, Richard, talk to Lorna, quite happy. Back to you, Jim.
Okay, so just a couple of, I've already mentioned sort of one exclusion. So if your profits are over 50,000, you won't qualify for any support. Unfortunately, if you started your business after 5th of April 2019, you won't qualify for any support either, which seems massively unfair, but that's the way it is at the moment. So it's only if you did a tax return for April 19 that you will qualify. And then the other thing I touched on, so if you do have other taxable income, so you may have investments or pension that you're receiving, or possibly be employed and self-employed, or have some property income, then if that other income amounts to more than half of your total income, so in other words, if it's bigger than your self-employed element, then again, you won't qualify for any support under this. So I don't think there's going to be many circumstances that would mean.
I think you've just answered Eddie's question, but he says, where the taxable income includes pension income, is this included? So I think
no, so yeah, it's only on your self-employed element, and if your pension income is more than your self-employed income, then you possibly won't qualify at all.
Okay.
Any more on that scheme?
Yes,
then?
I've got another question here from Richard. Are we only eligible if we do not work at all, or are we able to pick up what little work there might be?
Yep. So this is a bit different from the furloughed. So yep, you can still continue to run your business as a self-employed person. You can still generate income. As I say, what we believe is that if you make a claim under the scheme, or you're offered to apply for it by HMRC, we feel that, and it's only a feeling, that if you did that and then as I said, your earnings are actually the same as they were last year, then we feel there may be some sort of clawback. It's worth saying as well, I probably missed it actually. So the other thing, so if you receive this money, it needs to go on your tax return as income in the year that you receive it. So assuming payments are going to come in June, on your 2021 tax return, anything you receive under this scheme will need to be entered as taxable income. So they will claw a bit back through tax at a later stage, assuming that you have enough profits to take you over the personal allowance.
Bill asks, in respect of self-furloughing as a sole director, could the company profit, which is essentially my income, be taken into account?
No, so it will only apply to what you are taking through a PAYE scheme. So I'm assuming, most accountants would advise that you take a salary to use up your personal tax allowance each year and to keep you in the sort of national insurance pension, state pension regime. But it would only apply to that salary amount. If you're paying yourself a proper salary, which some directors will be, then 80% is what you can claim back. But if your company's making lots of profit and you're taking it as dividends, unfortunately there's no support for that at the moment.
And Dennis poses he's seeking some clarification. The director of the company can't be a self-employed person? Question. If so, why do we file company tax and personal tax returns?
Yeah, so this was another sort of focus at the moment, I guess, from the sort of business community. So yeah, technically directors, obviously they have to fill in a self-assessment tax return, but their income falls under either PAYE as an employee of their own company, or through investment income as a shareholder in their own company. So it's not self-employed income as such. At the moment, I thought there'd be more of a clamour, but there's a it's growing pace now that directors of small businesses at the moment are receiving very little in the way of support. So I think most businesses and most directors can't realistically furlough themselves, and as I say, unless they're undertaking no activity. So if you're continuing to try and work to keep your business afloat as a director at the moment, there's no support for you as an individual. So that's I think that's something that again may change, hopefully Friday, because I'm in that situation as well. So yeah, hopefully there'll be some support coming on that.
Okay, Jim, please go.
Okay. So that's a sort of summary of the support that's available. I wrote this before sort of last Friday on the self-employed, but it still applies to most of us. So, there is a lack of support for company directors. I think this, self-employed amongst us now have got some support, which is great, but there is still a lot of gaps in some. The rates is a good example, really. So, I'm in a serviced office. There could be another accountant next door that's employing exactly the same amount of people as me, but in his own, or paying an office to an individual landlord, and he's getting support and I'm not. So, there's lots of potential unfairness in what they've announced so far. So I think it's still moving almost day by day, and I think there will be more announcements. But we've just gone through what is available at the time. It's not always going to be fair, and all I would suggest on that is if you're members of business groups, Institute of Directors or FSB or Chamber of Commerce, then speak to those guys and get them to lobby for your sort of individual circumstances. They've got obviously a lot to try and cover, and I think they're doing their best to include as many people as possible, but there are still those gaps. And then on a sort of more practical level, really, if you're not receiving those grants, or if they're not going to be enough to cover your outgoings, then some practical actions that you can take as the business owners. Do a cash flow for your business. It's obviously a good habit to have anyway, but certainly in times like this, do a simple cash flow. Look at your income and your outgoing. Someone mentioned sort of fixed costs and fixed overheads earlier. So, work out what is the minimum you need to survive in terms of cash that you need to bring in, and then either are you going to be able to do that from work, or do you need some support somewhere? Protect your cash. It's very much at the moment a case of just trying to survive. I think it's really unprecedented what we're going through at the moment, and I think the best advice I can give is just look after your cash flow as best you can, and that's sort of both personally and from a business point of view. Run through all of your direct debits. Look at which ones are necessary and which ones maybe you can put a hold on. Certainly any sort of finance payments that you've got, any loans, any leases on assets, any car contract hires, your landlords, if you have got office premises, any key suppliers, just negotiate with those people. Most of the financial institutions are doing payment holidays of at least 3 months. So your mortgages at home, any loans, just get that payment holiday where you can. Try and speak to them. A lot of them have gone online because obviously the phone lines are sort of inundated. But as long as you get an agreement before you sort of stop those payments, it shouldn't affect your credit limit moving forward, or your credit rating, moving forward. And really just go through your payments that you've gone out and just negotiate with whoever you can. I think it's important that we look after each other as well. So I wouldn't suggest that stopping payments without speaking to people, because that's just going to put them under more pressure. But we've got to try and help each other through this. So go through that. Definitely. You mentioned earlier, Mike, you can pay your VAT bill if you want to. I would suggest, they're offering it. Then, I would take that offer not to pay HMRC, even if I've had a lot of cash reserve. It's something you can pay at any time moving forward, and really until we know. I think the biggest thing for any business at the moment is we just don't know the timescales of this. And until we've got more of an idea of that, then I would just, protect as much cash as possible. Collecting your debt. So, if people do owe you money for work that's been done, I think the longer you leave it, the harder it's going to get to get that money, as everyone's cash is going to be under pressure. So, try and do that now. there will already be sort of challenges for people in doing that, but just try and get in as much money as you're owed as possible. And then just, more generally, help people out. That's what we're trying to do as, with our clients, and why I'm sat here today, really, on a personal note, as an owner of an accountancy business, I've not been directly affected. We're still working from home, and we're still productive, but I'm only going to survive if most of my clients do, and that's so we're trying to do that, and just do that with your network. Really, it's going to be, there may be circumstances where you're not going to get paid for doing something for someone, but they will remember it when we get back to some sort of normality. And then also we all we're all passionate about our businesses, and we want to protect them as much as we can. And certainly if you've got staff that you're responsible for as well, but don't neglect your personal circumstances. Don't someone mentioned earlier taking a sort of personal loan, and just be very careful if you're doing that. The business can be dealt with. If you're a sole trader, it's difficult because you are personally liable anyway, but a limited company, there are ways that you can get out of this without having massive impacts on yourself personally. So just be aware of that. And then, just sort of hang in there at the moment. It's very difficult. We all want to be making decisions and planning, but it's just very difficult to do that at the moment. Personally, I think things will become clearer over the next 2 to 3 weeks in terms of how long we're going to be, potentially in this situation, and also what other support might be coming. So, just try not to make decisions that might not be so great in 2 or 3 weeks' time if you can possibly hang on. But that will depend on obviously individual circumstances and cash flows. And then I've just got I think most of this is what I've just said. The other one, it's awful, but people are already taking advantage. So there will be lots of scams out there. You'll be getting lots of emails and text messages, saying that your rebate is ready to go, and click this link and give us your bank details. Just be extremely wary of that. Obviously, when it'll be very clearly announced when HMRC are starting to contact people, but before that, just if anyone's offering you some money now, it's probably a scam rather than anything genuine. And then finally, just to protect yourselves, and this is more for directors than self-employed, but just keep a record of your sort of decision-making processes. If you're furloughing staff or deciding not to pay someone, keeping a record just protects yourself if you do get into a, hopefully not, but if you do get into a sort of dispute later on or an insolvency situation, if you've got records of this is why I made this decision, that's going to help you further down the line. So that's it in terms of the sort of presentation there, Mike. I don't know, any other questions that
yes, I've got a couple more. Let me just run through those. Dennis came back really with another comment on his question. As directors, we can't furlough, which means we technically have to work, but the guidelines of the government don't allow us to work. For example, travel is effectively ruled out. We are therefore between the devil and the deep blue sea, and I suppose that is the reality of it, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So as I said, you can furlough, but not if you're not unless you're really just mothballing your business for 2 months. As I say, I think there will be more support coming for directors, sort of owner managed businesses. But at the moment, we are sort of stuck in an impossible place, really.
Nick Fieldhouse asks, if I am currently furloughed, wouldn't it be best to delay sending invoices for work already performed? Because if I did send those invoices, that would suggest that I am still working.
I think, I mean, technically, I think if it's work that you've already done, I think you would be okay on that. If you're, I think if you furlough and then go and do, even if it's just one job next week, then, I think that would fall foul of any sort of regulations that might come in. I think if you're just doing, you know, a tiny bit of admin around work that's already been completed, I think that would be absolutely fine.